Then you live a life such as mine. It is not that unexpected to start having to keep logs of all of your adventures. Yes, and such that is the case with me, Abraham Van Helsing. Of course, I do have another reason for trying to keep all my missions straight. I am trying to assemble a group of monster hunters that will take over for me when I retire. And, they definitely need to be caught up on prior missions in order to accurately fight the monsters in the future. If one forgets the past, they are doomed to repeat it and all of that stuff. Now, the first monster I will be cataloging today, is the Comerton Swamp Frog. The Comerton Swamp Frog is a humanoid frog monster that resides in the swamps. I mean, it's very much in the name. This creature has a croaking that sounds much like a banjo, and the most peculiar thing is its killing technique. The swamp it lives in is populated with several other animals and monsters, which all seem to treat the Comerton Frog Beast as the leader of sorts. When they capture a new prey, they will arrange a circle, putting the new victim in the middle of it. At that point, the victim will be forced to fight the Comerton Frog Beast, almost like it's putting on a show for the monsters. As I myself was admittedly thrown into this, and admittedly the only reason I survived this was due to a stroke of luck. At the time I was fighting this creature, a rainbow just so happened to appear in the sky. The creature seemed distracted by the rainbow, and that gave me enough opportunity to kill it and make it out alive. This supposed rainbow connection might be helpful for defeating more of this creature in the future, since we don't know if this was a single specimen or a species. Knowing, however, that they are easily distracted by rainbows could be helpful in defeating them in the future, should we find any more. Now, for this one, you might be noticing that there's a bit of a trend, which is that I'm just making these things, but slightly more monstrous. And, yeah, I don't have much design notes on this one. This one I know for sure, however, was an individual and not an entire species. Hidden in layers of the Sesame Mountains was indeed a small town that was known far and wide for one thing: their baked goods. Specifically, their cookies. It was said that far and wide, the smell of the cookies went on for miles, which was seemingly what attracted this monster to the exact location. We have dubbed this the Cookie Monster, simply due to how it operated. It seemingly smelt the aroma of the cookies and came down to wreak havoc. It went all throughout the streets of the Sesame, destroying everything in its path, and also eating everything in its path as well. Mostly eating, to be perfectly honest. That's when I was called to deal with it. I tried my traditional techniques for trying to deal with ogre and troll-like monsters, and these failed. The monster was too durable within itself. So I had to come up with a different plan. I took the rest of the town's cookies, except for a few that I admittedly ate, and put them all into its cave. This lured the monster back to its own cave, where I put a bunch of rocks over the cave to lock it inside. I admittedly do not know how long this will hold. The monster will inevitably break out again, but this technique can be used over and over, as the monster does not seem particularly intelligent, and is easily tricked by its own hunger. Granted, though, we have gotten several reports of monsters within the Sesame Mountain towns, so this is an area I feel as if I will be in for quite a while. Now, for this one, I didn't have as much of a concept in mind going into it. Like for Kermit and the Fraggle one coming up, I had a bit more of a concept going into it. This one, I was just kind of drawing, and if it looked good, I kept it. So, hopefully it turned out well. Hope you enjoy. The next monster we cover is indeed one of a species, and a very annoying species at that. I got a call from an elderly physician who was living alone near the Sesame Mountains with his dog. He complained to me about several noises filling in his house, and he was convinced that something was coming from under his house. I was greatly confused by this, as a monster would need to be very, very small to actually fit under an old man's house. But nevertheless, I caved and eventually decided to check out this situation. It was then where I had to admittedly apologize, since he was correct in his assumption. The Fraggle Gremlins are a race of tiny creatures that travel in underground tunnels. They are mostly eaten by these weird furry giant things, and also are known to make mischief wherever they go, whether that be stealing food or simply being really annoying to an old man trying to live in peace. Yes, but these did make bigger problems, as annoying as the Fraggles are, they are only an omen of what is to come. See, there is a common rule of wherever a Fraggle shows up, giants are soon to follow, as giants mostly feast on Fraggles, those trying to capture them and cook them and eat them. Of course, dealing with tiny threats is not that much of an issue and are more of a common annoyance. Giant threats, however, are a lot bigger things to worry about. Quite literally, because, the bigger. Yeah, so, therefore, I now had to deal with this. Yes. I have admittedly not yet found a solution for how to deal with this particular problem yet. But I assure you that when I will, these beasts will be no more, and will leave this old man to retire in peace for once in his life. In my personal opinion, this one is probably the best of the entire episode. Like, the other ones are good. The last one's okay. I wouldn't exactly call it good, but it's still. This one actually turned out pretty well. I had a concept going in mind, which is always helpful. And I really like how I did the texturing. For this one, like for some of the other ones, I've just been trying to do basically just redrawing the character, but in a more realistic, scary manner. But also, I had to figure out the struggle of how to add, like, the shirt thing that Fraggles have without having it be like a sweater, because that would sound weird. Like, you could imagine if a random wild animal came up to you wearing a sweater. That's not how wild animals are supposed to work, and these are supposed to be similar to, wild animals, so I had to try to work around that. Another thing I had to work around was trying to get the pom-poms in her hair to actually work, because I'm trying to make these look a slight bit realistic and creepy, but it's kind of hard to do that when there's just pom-poms. But nobody that I know is actually going to be intimidated by pom-poms in somebody's hair. So, I think I managed to scale those down enough where they don't distract too much, but also keep them big enough where they are still very prevalent in the design. So, anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Here's the Fragile Gremlin. Now, if you remember the first parts of this whole experience, you are probably wondering how I've got out of that one swamp with the thousands of monsters. Well, it's a long story, but one of the most intimidating ones that I faced was the blonde boar. The blonde boar was, it's a giant boar, which is like, it was a giant pig that was well known throughout the land for its blonde mane that sprouted from the back of its head, as well as having tiny spikes at the end of its hind legs. It was an exceptionally strong creature, and during the time where the frog monster was alive, it seemed very close to the swamp frog. Although, the two did hit a lot. And by that I mean the frog monster would constantly be being launched across the entire swamp after being hit by the blonde boar. I was eventually able to distract it by holding a mirror up into its face. It was distracted by this, and from what I could tell, it stared into that mirror for about 5 days. This was extremely vain for what appeared to be a regular animal, but either way, I escaped, and later will probably go back to finish off a lot more of these monsters in the future. If you have any more recommendations for monsters you would like me to cover, please put them in the comments below. Okay, for this one, I didn't really have a concept going in mind. Like, I had a concept, but it wasn't as fleshed out as some of the other concepts. All I knew was I wanted to do, like, this giant, pig monster thing. So, that's pretty much what I did. Like I said, I didn't really have that much to say regarding the design of this. It was a bit hard to make it as distinct as just a regular boar, since Miss Piggy doesn't have that much design features about her that it would translate well into an original design. But either way, it still looks pretty good. It's probably still the weakest one in the episode. My favorite would probably still have... my favorite is the current one, but the one that probably looks the best is the Fraggle, in my opinion. By the way, it turned out well enough. So, like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this.